All right. Well, it is good to see everybody. Hello, hello, everybody. Today is going to be a little bit of a review if you were at the accessibility pro tip session during the spring, but there's also going to be some new items too. And then we are so excited, and I have it noted here, we are going to have a new dean for SAS coming up July 13th. And Steve Levine has been our interim dean. And he and I actually met yesterday, and he sent me some things that I'm sharing with you all as well. And he's excited for our new dean to start because she is somebody that is really good with distance education. So we are extremely excited. Mo and or Lynn, do you need help with taking roll, or are we?
I think Mo is going to do it.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so our agenda for today, in addition to asking questions, and with this particular topic, I would like to invite you to please ask questions on the spot. Don't wait until the end to ask questions because a lot of times you need to be able to see it and be in the actual topic itself. So today we're talking about universal design, and we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility and formatting on Canvas, as well as some advice from student support services, and there are some
Student accessibility services.
Yes, student accessibility services.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm like going, okay, I got to fix that. And I'm going to do it because if not, I'll forget. Student accessibility services. There we go. And then I have a number of extra universal design links for you to take a look at, including some TED Talks and some other ideas about universal design. So I want to start off by sharing that an overview of what universal design is, and there's actually a lot of different groups that give you this many tips and that many tips and all of this, and to me that's sort of secondary. It's more important to understand what universal design is and what it can mean for your class. And so universal design learning, that's the L part, aims to change the design of the environment rather than change the learner. And when environments are intentionally designed to reduce barriers, all learners can engage in rigorous, meaningful learning. And Lynn has done a couple of wonderful sessions, one during the actual COVID time and one more recently, and where she talked about chunking and using language purposefully. So if you're going to use the language here, you're going to use it here, you're going to use it there as well, so that students know what it is you're asking them to do. That would be a characteristic of universal design. So,
and by the way, that session, all these sessions are available on the online teaching site. So if you need help finding any of these things, let me know and we'll direct you. But
yes.
Go ahead, Janet. Sorry,
yes.
I just wanted to throw that out.
No, please interrupt. I definitely do not have a whole 50, I don't have a 60 minutes. Usually I have like 5 hours and I have to narrow it down to 1. And this time we have lots of time. So please interrupt. Please, let's make this a dynamic conversation. But
I'm putting the link to the slides in the chat over and over and over because new people keep coming in. Right. They can't see the chat. So feel free to open up the slides on, okay, I'll keep it going. All right. Thank you.
So what I'm trying to share is that that these particular pro tip sessions, they're separate, but they also meet together. And so all the things that we're doing are trying to support universal design. And as Lynn said, I'm glad she mentioned it, we're constantly updating the online teaching resources. Every single week when I send the announcement, I always send the last week's video and the handout. So if you need to, you can go back there if you don't see it in the pro tip section. Anyway, so with universal design, that we're looking to design the environment to reduce the barriers. And so I looked at a lot of different universal design guidelines, and like I said, I'm giving you links to others that I thought were really useful. But this was one of my favorites, and I already have it open here. Just need to get to it. All right, and I'm gonna move us, I think, over here. All right, so I wanted to share that I really liked this particular handout that came from CAST about UDL guidelines, and I was going to copy and paste and do a whole bunch of stuff with it, but I really thought that they did such a good job that I would just take you here. And there are 3 areas that we look at for universal design, that we're providing multiple means of engagement, that we're providing multiple means of representation, and we're providing multiple means of action and expression. And so it talks about the why, the what, and the how. And if we go down here, I wanted to start down here for a moment because this is where we're trying to get to with students, that we're trying to help all students to be able to self-regulate. We're wanting to provide options for comprehension, and we're wanting to try and help students with executive functions, which means the goal setting, support and strategy development, etc. And so these 3 here are what it is we're trying to do in order to provide universal design for our students. So when we provide options for individual choice and autonomy, we're actually trying to connect to students' own schemas. We're giving them reason to come in and make an effort. We're trying to make it more relevant, value, and authentic. When we're trying to provide options for perception, is we're trying to be able to display the information in such a way that students understand the information. And as Lynn has talked about many, many times, it's about the idea of we want to be able to present the information where students aren't having an issue with trying to learn the new information, but also trying to understand how you're presenting it to them. That's the extra cognitive overload. So if we have it designed in such a way that takes down the barriers, and we're going to take a look at some of those in just a minute, then students can focus in on the learning and not have to focus in on like, how am I supposed to do this, etc. And that also goes back to why it's so important to have an orientation period in your class where students have an opportunity to learn about how you're going to run your class. We're all hopefully using Canvas, but how I use Canvas and how Lynn uses Canvas and how all of you are using Canvas, there's a lot of choice and difference. And so if students are taking in the fall, they're taking maybe 4 classes and they're all online and they're all with Canvas, if we're not giving students an opportunity to figure out A, how Canvas works, and B, how Canvas works in each of your classes, then they're going to be behind before they even begin. And so this is extremely important. And then
I'm going to throw something in there
yes,
real quick, just as a addition to that.
Yes.
Is that it's important that we understand that cognitive overload a lot, that students are this is particularly important for students who have never been in an online class before, which will be the majority of your students. And as you're thinking about what you've done for your entire career in a face-to-face class, you have to start to rethink how that looks in an online environment. It's not just taking your face-to-face class and replicating it on Canvas or in Zoom. It can't be, because of all of these ideas. So if we took a look at all this brain research and use it as you're doing your course design, sometimes it's just little things like the chunking. So just keep that in mind as you're building and doing your course design for fall. That's all.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, Lynn, because I'm going to bring it back to a comment Veronica and I were talking before the session started, and the way that I'm finding out, like, I mean, I've been teaching online for 10 years, okay? And Lynn's been doing it for 20. And every time I go back, there's things I need to improve and go back and fix. And the place at which I figure out what those things are from the students themselves, based on the questions that they're asking me. If I'm seeing a question about something that is perfectly clear to me, and in my head, my initial response, although I never say this, you haven't read the syllabus, or you haven't seen the front page. It's right there. You know, in my head, I'm like going, come on, people. But the truth is those questions are letting me know. They're actually teaching me how to fix my course so that it takes down the barriers for others. And Lynn and I have talked about this as well. We've had individual students who have been telling us certain things, and we're like, I go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I did not know X, Y, Z. And I now need to improve how I'm putting my class together so that I can meet the needs of that one student. But really, meeting the needs of that one student is often meeting the needs of others that are silent and that are just struggling to try and figure out your course.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point.
Yeah, so every time a student asks me a question, and in my initial response in my head is, come on, people, didn't you look at the materials that I've provided? I've tried to switch that to, okay, this student is asking a question. What that tells me is that I need to go back and see if I made it clear. I need to go back and see if I need to remind about it. Do I need to shift it slightly differently so that it's more clear for students? And the truth is that if I go back, and I go back and I look at my classes that I taught online 3 years ago, and I look at the classes that I'm doing this summer, they are dramatically different. And so, and it's similar, you don't notice that face-to-face, because face-to-face, you're doing it face-to-face and it goes away. But when you're doing it online, you're able to go back and see that history and see that change and that growth. And I think that that's why it's so important that and I mean the collective you, and I mean really we, that whenever I have an opportunity to be an observer in someone's class, someone's Canvas course, I jump at it, because I want to see how they are doing things differently to perhaps meet the needs of the students better than I can. So, so this is the multiple measures of representation. And then we get into providing multiple means of action and expression. And that goes back to, we have the SLOs and we have these assignments that we want students to do. But the question is, are there choices for students? Are we making it where students can have the ability to show what they know in different ways? And it doesn't mean that you're being fair or unfair. It means that you're being equitable. And I had a meeting yesterday with a student. I sat for 15 minutes with a student and tried to figure out an alternative way for him to show me what he's learned, what he's going to learn in the class. He notified me ahead of time, and so I have something slightly different for him. Different doesn't mean that he's not following the SLOs. Different means that he is different.
Okay, I'm just going to do this so they know I'm here.
I got it. Go ahead.
Thank you. So different simply means that he's able to show what he knows in a way that removes the barriers for him. And the barriers might be barriers due to being part of the SAS program, but the barriers also might mean based on work, based on responsibilities, and so
or technology.
Or technology. The lack
they may not have access to, although they can get Microsoft Office for free, which I always tell my students. It may be easier for them in some cases, or if it's the difference between being able to participate in your class and not able to participate in your class, by all means, I let them turn in their work handwritten with a photograph or a scan, right, or a note app or anything like that. That's how it works.
Right. That's part of what it is for universal design. And again, something as simple as, like, I've had students in the past, they're like, I can't see any of your visuals on Canvas. I don't know. And I finally figured it out that there were certain students who were not using the correct browsers. They were using Internet Explorer or Safari as opposed to Chrome and Mozilla Firefox. A very simple, small thing that is now very explicit in my orientation for students to use those browsers instead of the others. But I still have students with that issue. And instead of saying, how come you didn't pay attention to it in the orientation, I'm always extremely patient and say, are you using these particular browsers? Oh yeah, I am. Okay, that fixed it, thank you. So sometimes it's just something that simple. Okay, and I wanna share that I know that I only sort of touched in on the Universal Design Guidelines in that handout, but that handout, as well as many others, you could spend a lot of time going in there and really digging through, but I just wanted to touch on.
And that's linked in this slide,
yes,
correct?
Everything that is underlined is linked, yes.
Okay, I also put it in the chat, so we're good.
Yes, okay. So now I want to go to Canvas and I want to talk to you. This is a bit of the review, but I think it's important for accessibility. And I have this page linked here. I created a sample page in our online teaching resources here. And it's a sample page for accessibility. And I want to tell you that I'm going to hear some really wonderful information soon. We're getting some more improved accessibility on Canvas, which will actually even pinpoint accessibility more to teachers. And I am super excited. And as soon as we find out more about this, rolling it out in our Canvas, we will.
It's a software. It's going to be a plugin. Yeah.
Yes, it's going to be a plugin.
It's coming.
It's coming, and it's going to actually look at your visuals, and it'll tell you on the spot whether they're accessible or not. So I have a page. I'm going to fix a few things here, but I wanted to show you that the idea of using the headings within Canvas, within Google, within Word, using the font headings and different types is the simplest way for you to make your documents accessible. And on Canvas, it's right here where we can see whether there's the paragraph, the header styles here. There's no title here. In Google, there's a title. So you can go into Google and choose title and then header 1, etc. But it really doesn't matter what it's called because it will show you based on the size that the paragraph is the regular text versus the headers. So I want to share how important that is for students who have screen readers. They're able to identify what the particular header is so that it kind of indicates to them what they're looking at. So even if I went here to this title and I wrote the word title, even if I went right next to it and I just took it out, I'm going to go under it and took it out of the header and just kept it at paragraph. I want to see what size it is. It's 21. So I could go here and I can choose close to 21. I'm going to choose 24 here. And I'm going to write the word title. Doing it manually is putting up a barrier that is not needed for students. So you really want to rely on the tabbing and the bullet points and the numbers and the headers for students so that you can take away those barriers when they use screen readers.
Why is that a barrier, Janet?
It's a barrier because what happens is that, thank you, Lynn, for asking that question. It becomes a barrier because the student is going to identify it as just paragraph language. And if you want students to know what a title is or an overview or be able to have the information chunked, but everything is just using the paragraph where the teacher is by hand making the font type bigger or smaller, there's no indicator for students. The reason why I put that title, that second title, I did it by myself, right, without using the header below. When I put that just by using 21, visually I can see that it looks like a title. But if students can't see or they're having trouble seeing and they need to use a screen reader, they're not going to be able to identify it like my able students who are able to see can.
So it will be read by the screen reader as paragraph text.
That's correct. That's correct.
So if you want to differentiate your titles and your sections, that's why you need to use the headers.
Right. And using the bullet points here or the numbering is actually very useful as well. It lets the screen reader know. And the truth is, what a lot of times I will type out an assignment and I'll just kind of type it in paragraph form, and then I'll go back and fix it and put it in bullet point form, because when it's one big chunk of paragraph, students aren't going to read it. But if they are able to see, this is the first thing I need to do, and then this is the second thing, and then this is the third thing, it's easier for them to be able to handle doing the activity or assignment. And that's true for people whether they can see or they're using a screen reader. So that's the universal design, where the idea is that universal design may have started specifically for students with disabilities, but it ends with, it makes it better for all students. So I wanted to show you that your visual, like I have a visual up here and I'm going to go up to it in just a minute. It should not have .jpg or PNG or the words image, visual, photo, or banner. And I'm going to click on it here and I'm going to go to the image, and I left this here. So when you first download your visual, it's going to have the name of your visual, and I like to call it a banner so that I can find it. So it's a useful title for me, but it's not a useful title for students with screen readers, because the screen reader is already telling the student that it's a visual or a banner, etc. And so it's just extra not needed information. So now I'm taking out everything here and it will read activity. The software that we're going to eventually get is going to help you notice whether or not you've created the proper alt text or alt tags. But you definitely want to take that out of your visual.
Question.
Yes.
So you don't describe the icon or the rest of the banner? You just put activity?
Well, okay, you can describe it more, and in fact it's included, I believe it's either here or in the bundle module that I created, a link to how to describe. Sometimes I describe more than that, sometimes I describe less. If there's a quotation that I use there, I'll write the whole quotation here. Mm-hmm. But I mean, so I can write activity for students to complete. I don't know that I would add anything about this little visual here. I don't know that since I have my name in the college here, I don't think I'd put that in every single one. But that's a matter of choice. When
I do describe the icon in mine.
Okay, so how would you describe this icon, Lynn?
What I would just say, I don't know, I can't see it. What is it? Icon with person with thought bubbles and computer.
Okay.
Something like that.
All right. So
but it's up to you. If you're using the visual, it seems to me it's important to describe it. But if I mean, I don't really know, and I've heard that less is more.
Right.
So I want to take a look at some of the guidelines, and I know you have that linked, so we'll take a look at that.
Right.
You know, at some point, and we'll see.
Right. Yeah. So I changed it to person. Let's see. It says activity icon with person thinking. So it could be that, but yeah, the less is, you're trying to make it brief, but enough for somebody to be able to understand. And like I said, I have that link, and if I don't have it in this particular presentation, I will share that. Okay. But I do tend to keep it more brief. It just depends on, you know, for me, this is like a banner. This is like a title banner. But yeah, they don't even like you to write the word banner. So,
right. I got it.
So I will tell you my bad habit and that is underlining. And in fact, what I'm doing right now as I'm going through each and every one of my assignments that I am giving students this summer is I am taking out the underlining, and this was shared with by Nick Matthews in our last accessibility session. Thank you, Nick. That underlining looks like a hyperlink. And so if I want to take regular text and I want to emphasize it in some way, there's bold, there's italics, and there's highlighting. So I will do that as opposed to underlining. I used underlining a whole lot. So I have a whole lot of little things to do to go back and fix. And these are the things that we learn over time, that things that we used to depend on, we change. We also talked about using chunking with bullets and numbers. I try to do that as well. One of the things I would like Canvas to improve, and this is what I need to tell the Canvas community, is that I would like this little number 1 here to be an A instead of a number 1, because I'm indenting it in. And so if I'm going to be using chunking where I'm indenting in, I usually on Canvas, not on Google, I tend to go with bullets as opposed to numbers so that I can avoid that, 1, 2, because to me that's confusing.
Janet, real
yes.
quick, Rachel Martinez has something she wants to say about hyperlinks. Can you unmute, Rachel, and say what you were just mentioning to me?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so on the hyperlinks, the screen readers, if I recall correctly, won't read them. So you have to alter to the alternate for the hyperlink. Do you know what I mean by that?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay, so I'm trying to look for an example for you. So you click to change it, and it'll actually say what the hyperlink is, instead of having the HTML.
Yes.
I know what you mean.
Yes.
Okay,
I know what you mean.
That makes sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Go ahead. Can you say that, Janet?
Yes. So, for example, right here, I'm moving back to the slideshow. That instead of putting the hyperlink with the HTTPS,
Right.
I have it read as Canvas. So you're going to that Canvas page.
Correct.
Or the Universal Design Guidelines. And yes, and that is actually, Rachel, I am so glad that you brought that up. That is so important, because I will see people doing both things. And so it's, we started out with one way, and then people are transitioning to this other way. And the reason is because the screen reader doesn't read it, as well as we're not going to be typing most of that stuff in anyway. So if there's a broken link, we're going to be asking somebody, can you please send me a better link? So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Yes. And Canvas kind of forces you to do that, because anytime you try to copy and paste a hyperlink like the Zoom link, you cannot make it be an HTTPS. It will often just go into the link itself. It'll be some sort of word or just a little thing that's there, and you can't even get it on Canvas. And I think that's probably why. So thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that.
She's also mentioning that Pages in Canvas is the only place with the immersive reader. So not in assignments, not in modules,
and why?
announcements.
And that's, to me, that seems odd. That seems like Canvas needs to improve that.
Yeah.
Because I know what you're talking about, Rachel, because I don't use the immersive reader, but I've seen what you're talking about. And to me, that's something that needs to be improved. That is,
well, we'll see what happens once we get Ally and see what that looks like.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that, Rachel. Okay, so the next thing is to avoid excess spacing, because screen readers may think the document is over. I am super guilty of trying to space things out on a page, because I think it looks better spaced out. And what's interesting, and Lynn has really pointed me toward this as well, is that if students are on their phones, they're not seeing it in the same way that you've attempted to space it out anyway. So it's it doesn't look the way you want it to look on a phone versus, on a computer. So avoid extra spacing, because we want to make sure that people know that no, the document isn't over. And it's also probably frustrating for the screen reader to continue to go on all this space. It's a big, huge time waster and an extra barrier. Use color contrast checkers to see if you need it so that students can see. I purposely did this. I'm going to show you this in a minute. This is very difficult to see, but I will share with you that sometimes it's very hard to tell whether or not you have the proper contrast. And this little screen track, canvas tracker or checker is going to be really helpful to you with that. So if your coloring is not contrasted enough, it will help you with that. So using the tracker for accessibility. And then it will also help you with tables. So I want to share with you, I try to do this with every single page that I create. I am sometimes guilty of needing to go back and do it later on, but this little tracker here in Canvas is actually very helpful. And I am going to tell you that my page is out of compliance here, and I'm going to go to the tracker, and it's going to help me. And so it's helping me with this color contrast, and it says change color. So I'm gonna, I'll change it to maybe something like this. We'll see if that works or not. Okay, and then it's going to also help with the tables. Tables should include a caption describing the contents of the table. So I'm going to say, I'll put calendar. I'll just put it because it doesn't. Okay, and then there's no table headers. Okay, so it will help with that. So I could do a header column. And so it's going to continue to take me through in order to apply, to help me. I had to hit apply. Okay, I want to do this. I'm going to do this for the third time. And let's see.
Try black.
Okay, well, there we go. Apply. Thank you. And then now, and sometimes that's going to be what happens. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I hit it. And then finally the accessibility checker is done. But I will share with you that this visual here, it did not tell me that when I tried the accessibility checker before, it did not tell me to change the naming or get rid of the .png. So you need to make sure that you are naming your visuals so that they are accessible. Okay, and I'm going to hit save. So I'm very grateful for this accessibility tracker because it helps. Here we go. All right. So I want to go down. I actually have quite a bit of text on these pages, and on purpose, because I wanted to share with you what Steve Levine shared. I shortened it a little bit, but I asked Steve if he could find some links to help with captioning videos for alternative media with PDFs. And so he's given us links to tutorials, and we don't have time for these tutorials, but I want to share that they are here. And again, we're going to be working, communicating with Celeste Phelps as soon as she can come and meet with us so that we can make sure that we're helping with accessibility for online items. The other thing is that Bernice Watson sadly retired, and she was the one that I would email to ask for support on Zoom. And we do not know who's going to take that position yet, but there will be somebody, there should be somebody by fall. I also wanted to share that I asked him for some captioning tips, and I want to share that there are so many different technologies out there with captioning help, but a lot of times what happens is they will auto caption, but you will need to go back and actually correct the captions with capitals and periods and commas and those kinds of things. I still love it. It saves me a lot of time. Another thing that you could do, though, if you are creating a video that you need to caption, a lot of times I will write out my script ahead of time, and I will use the script to help me with the video so that I have my captions ready to plug in. I also asked Steve about Zoom and what would you do with students who are hard of hearing and need interpreters. And what he said is that once you've requested the interpreters, that the professor should make those interpreters co-hosts and then let them spotlight, and they will do the spotlighting. And he says that they know to spotlight so that they can help make sure that their video is in the place where the student who needs it can see it. So that is really important. Another issue that we've been talking about in terms of doing Zoom is that if you were doing, and this is a practice that has not been in my wheelhouse at all, but if you are, the interpreters are concerned that they're going to be on video and students beyond the semester are going to have access to their interpreting. And what SAS is proposing for right now, and what we've been talking about, although this may change, but this is just something to think about in terms of good practices, is that when you do a Zoom recording for your class, it is for that class or those classes if you're doing two of the same class together. It's for those classes for that semester only, so that we are protecting the privacy of the interpreters and their work.
And the students.
And the students.
You know, because if you're using it semester to semester, it's not going to have the current students in it. So that's, and I don't know that a lot of people do that, but it's a really good thing to be keeping in mind, because if you're
Right.
thinking, oh, you know, I did this lecture, let me just put this Zoom lecture up again.
Right. Right.
Shouldn't be lecturing on Zoom anyway.
Well, right, but you know, I've had meetings on I've had meetings on Zoom where I thought I was recording and I didn't, and I've just shown students an older one because I accidentally didn't do it. But that's a practice that I'm going to have to stop. So, right, so those are just certain things that, you know, we hadn't really thought about, because not everybody was even necessarily Zooming up until like 3.5, 4 months ago. There are very few that knew how to Zoom.
I just want to add one other thing about that first part on captioning tips.
Yes.
When you are describing something in your video, this is what it kind of refers to. I just want to add some verbiage to that. Instead of saying, you click right here and see this right here, try to describe the thing that you are pointing at, or the thing that you are asking them to click on. So instead of saying click right here, say click this link to the video on whatever, or in this picture of this cat we're going to be discussing, so that when the captions come, they actually make more sense in and of themselves. And the reason I came to want and started doing this practice is because I was taking classes, and it was basically all, it was asynchronous with a bunch of videos. And the videos were like 20 minutes long. And a lot of times I would forget what was earlier in the video, and I would want that information, but I didn't want to watch the whole 20-minute video again.
Right.
So I asked the instructor for transcripts. And if you add a transcript that says, click here, do this, do that, it doesn't make any sense. But if you're describing, click on this video, so then I could just go through the transcript and find the information I needed, and then jump back into that timestamp in the video. So if you can do, if you upload to YouTube, you can get a transcript with timestamps of your audio, which you can, always link a transcript, even for my Zoom, because Zoom will download your transcript as well. And that is so valuable for students in a universal design way, whether they need it for, you know, a learning difference or not.
Right, and that's fantastic. Thank you for adding those. And it's a practice, and I will go back and go, I thought I already fixed X, Y, and Z, but sometimes you miss things. So, and that's okay. We're all human. And I think that the guideline is that you are trying to do the best that you can, and you're going to continue to improve. So it's not asking, no one is asking you to be perfect, just trying to develop better and better practices. And I appreciate that comment so much, Lynn, about the description. And now I'm thinking, I'm like, am I?
Wait, it's hard. I don't always do it. I mess it up sometimes, but
Right.
I try to remember. And if you've ever been a student in an online class, you get it.
Right. And
take an online class to learn how to teach one, for
right.
sure.
And a lot of times the students themselves are happy to help you and give you suggestions, and they will say, can you please do this? And sometimes in my head I want to say, no, I'm not going to do that. But before I say no, I like to think about what are they asking me to do? Am I able to do that to reduce the barriers? What am I going to be able to do that in an ongoing way? And if I can do those things, I will, and I will try to build it into my practice. And I'm glad you asked to talk about this just for a minute. I told you that there was a link to how to write descriptive statements into a presentation, and that is this link. So you see that it's underlined. That's a link. That is from Steve Levine. So these were, I reached out to him and he gave me some suggestions for today.
Great.
Okay, so let's go to this. Okay, so this is a wonderful article called Fostering Inclusion with Universal Design Learning, and I highly recommend actually reading the article. It's not enough what I'm going to tell you here, but I wrote beyond SAS, beyond student support services, just so that we all understand the importance of universal design. Is that, for example, captions, like captions in videos and things, not only help hard of hearing students, but second language learners. And if I had more space, I'm going to say more. It helps me too. So a lot of times when I'm watching a video, an instructional video, I will have those captions on because I'm listening to what the person is saying and I'm reading what it is they're saying. And so having both of those in tandem kind of puts it into my brain a little bit better. And not everybody wants to do that, but I'm sharing I do that. And I hadn't even really thought about that.
I have to do that on TV all the time now, so I can't hear anything because I'm old and went to a lot of rock shows.
And then and what they found, Michelle Pacansky-Brock, who did a study on this and asked students what they chose to do if they were able to read something versus listen to something versus doing both. And what she found out is that, and it had nothing to do with SAS. It had nothing to do with that's why I'm saying student support services. It had nothing to do with DSPS. It had nothing to do with students needing extra support. What she found is that students sometimes choose to read all the time, sometimes choose to listen all the time, and some go back and
Finally, stupid.
So different people do different things based on their preference. And it could be that students would like to read it, but maybe they're driving and they have that particular time, and so they can listen to it, and that's easier for them to do, right? You know, or maybe they have to be in a quiet place and they'd like to listen, but they're going to read. So universal design is helpful for everyone. And then I wanted to share this: allowing choices regarding multiple formats allows students to show they have met the SLOs. And Lynn and I specifically in the English department, I don't know if there's any other English department people here, but this is
Michelle is here.
What? Pardon?
I think Michelle Fagundes is here.
Michelle, that people, we have this conversation all the time. Is the essay king or queen? Or are there other ways for students to be able to show what they know about writing without having to do just the traditional essay? And so that's the challenge that I think we all have in our disciplines. If we tend to be people that tend to give an exam, if that's the only way that you're trying to figure out what students are needing to show how they've learned things, I would challenge you. I challenge myself with this all the time. How is it that we can allow for choice, to allow students to have other ways to show what it is they've learned? And I'm in an Equity 102 class right now, and one of the wonderful strategies that they offer for showing that we've read this particular material is they give us the option. You could do an audio, you can do a video, you can do a text, you can write a poem, you can draw a picture, you can create, I mean, there's like all these different ways that we can showcase what it is we've learned. And so that's the challenge. That's what universal design is suggesting, is that there's more than one way to help students to show that they have met the actual SLOs. It's not just one thing.
And because of all the fear of cheating online, any way that you can create an assessment that shows students learning that is different than a quiz or a test or something that they might plagiarize, just get creative in that, because the bottom line for your discipline is that they meet the SLOs. As long as they do that, then I think that they're, they've met the requirements of your course. So this is a big conversation. Maybe I think we have a session on assessment later on in the term. Later on this summer. So we'll have to, look for options. In fact, Dan, I'm looking at STEM, reaching out to people on Twitter and things like that to try and find out what are some ways that we can assess in math and physics that isn't necessarily a test. And I understand what you're saying about having the proper notation. I get it. So I'm looking to see what some other people are doing. And you guys, please tell us as soon as you find out anything as well, because we don't know.
Regardless, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Lynn. And I'm asking you, please, everyone who's here today, anyone who happens to go back and watch this webinar, can you please email Lynn and myself, put us both in there. And if you are using non-traditional ways to assess, can you please give us examples that you would give us permission to share? We would give attributions to you. And if you want to give a little explanation of what it is and why, a little reflection on what you're doing, we would be hoping to share this with the community, because it's not, this is not a topic that is just, about ego. This is about all of us coming together and sharing these best practices. And we would be most appreciative if you could do that. All right, so I do want to point out as well that universal design learning is humanizing and it is equitable. Okay, so we are trying to remove barriers. We're also trying to make sure that students feel welcomed, feel willing to try and contact us and share with us what it is they need. And like I said earlier, that when students ask questions, or in some of the surveys that, my first survey that I asked students, and I asked questions, and one of the questions is, I am asking them to look at how I've introduced the orientation for the class. How do you feel about the types of activities that I'm doing? How do you feel about the way that I'm presenting the materials? And I really go back and carefully look at those responses, and I weed out the ones that say, yay, you're doing a good job. And I go to look at the ones where students are having issues. And I'm using those to try and make my teaching, my design better. And I often will go back to the student and try and get some more information from them so that I can make my class better. And I think one of the struggles, you know, and we've been talking about this as well, is that I will go back and I will have thought that I fixed everything for, I don't know, whether it's labeling an alternative text in a visual or describing a link or whatever it is. And one of the things that I'm noticing in my materials a lot, I will have lots of different screens open to the same class but different assignments, is that I want to try and make sure that the way I introduce an assignment is very similar on every assignment. The way that I'm chunking the information is similar. I'm trying to challenge myself to get it so that when students go in, just like if you look at MLA, with an MLA paper, we have the heading and we have the page numbering, we have the title and we have the spacing. I'm trying to get it so that it is pretty consistent for students utilizing these universal design principles with the spacing and the headers and all of that, but also even how I'm introducing the materials. That's where I'm trying to really challenge myself to get better. So these things, these lower the barriers and allow students to really focus in on learning. This last page here, I went through and I found some of the best, like the things that I did not have time to share with you today. A lot of schools are doing some wonderful things for universal design. This was just a kind of a toe touch into the water. I was kind of introducing things to you, but there are links here, links to help with the PDFs, links to help with how to name your links. You know, there's actually a couple of TED Talks here about the importance of universal design and how and what to consider by people who have needed universal design as learners. So these
are
are
these mostly on UDL, Universal Design for Learning, or are they, you know, because universal design started as an architecture principle?
Right. This is about learning. Yeah. This is about, yeah, this is higher ed. This is about learning. Like I said, there's you know, the one that I showed you with the 3 different principles, and then there's 7 principles, and there's 10, and there's a lot of different ways to organize it, but I think they're all extremely useful. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks.
So we are here and it is 11:53. And so I'd like to open it up and see if there's any questions or things that you would like to share. Experience, you know, topics, experiences, you know, different sorts of support here. So I'd like to open that up to see if there's any.
Well, we did have a question come up in the chat about captioning, and maybe you know, Janet. Tomoko says, I teach a foreign language. Do I need to add captioning to videos when I give listening comprehension assignments? Because I think the question then is, if you give the caption, they have the words.
Answer. They have the answer.
Yeah. Is that the question?
Yes. Yes, this is Tomoko. Yes. That was my question.
That is a good question, Tomoko. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think that might be an issue of equity, and maybe that's where SAS can support that. I don't
know. Or you change the activity. Is there a way to change the activity so that it's not, is there a way to do comprehension that isn't listening? But I don't know.
But or meaning that listening and actually reading the transcript isn't going to give the answer, so to speak.
Right. And yeah, maybe it doesn't. The transcript is not, you could do the transcript in the foreign language, maybe.
Right.
You know, which seems like a lot. That would be something you would have to do.
Okay. Thank you.
I do.
Well, the experts are Tim and Samuel. Samuel 10 minutes with Samuel, he'll tell you what the answer is.
Samuel who?
The web
Samuel
guy.
Chavez?
Yes,
Then
Samuel
Okay.
Chavez.
Can I interrupt? I
Please.
actually think that this question would be directed better to the specialist that is working with your student.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. Going back to SAS, what's going to happen is if you find out that you have a student who needs specific support and you're not sure about how to give the support, they will absolutely tell you. But it's a great question because I don't know.
Yeah, because the question is, do I have to caption for everybody in that instance? You know, because what you guys were just saying is if you have a student that has a specialist, you just go back to the specialist and say, I want them to do listening comprehension, but they're deaf and they don't, you know, so.
Well, I wonder if they're on Zoom or something, or let's, you know, if it was going to be a real classroom, face-to-face classroom situation, then
There'd be an interpreter, right?
there'd be an interpreter there, right?
Well, I haven't had students with that need, but I thought I was required to have captioning for everything, audio, video,
Mhm.
online.
Well,
Yeah.
so you don't have, let me share this, that if I am, like, for example, I'm in a class and I'm giving audio feedback to students and I found out, like, I have a little question on my questionnaire, are you okay with text feedback, audio feedback, or both? And if I'm giving audio feedback to somebody, I'm not captioning my audio feedback because it's to one student, right?
Okay.
So, but if I had a student who needed transcripts, then I'd probably just type my feedback, right? So when it's a one-to-one situation, it's different than a whole group situation.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Any other questions before we end for today?
There are a lot of resources in that slideshow, everybody. So
Fun.
mark it if you have it open, or find it on the Pro Tips tab on the online teaching resources site. The Pro Tips tab has every session we've ever done.
Thank you, Rachel.
So feel free to check out everything there, all the links. And then I like to bookmark stuff I want to look at again. So I don't necessarily have to go through Canvas again, but
Well, you can
all
also go to file and make your own copy. I do that with Lynn stuff all the time. Then I put Lynn, and then I have access in case Lynn decides she, for some reason, wants to get rid of it. I still
that's
have
right. Yeah, you can make a copy of any of the Google stuff and keep it in your own Google.
But I put a ton of links. In fact, I even put a link to our new dean, to her Cypress page, because then you could see a little bit about her history, since we don't have it yet at Cerritos. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. And again,